Marty Keller here in Sacramento, John Donovan in Oceanside, California, continuing our conversation about life, love, and rock and roll.
Yeah. I did a workshop called The 14 Traits of Way Out. So whatever anybody's struggling with, well, I don't know what they're struggling with. I know what I struggle with. And I've found information that has assisted me to make different choices. And I want to share it with everybody. Yay.
If I could say what you said in a little bit more Marty complicated kind of way, is for most of my life, I was living in a feedback loop of negativity and self-criticism.
Yeah.
And having discovered and worked with the accountability process that you taught me, I now live in a virtuous circle of ever increasing peace and joy.
Yeah.
So there's this dynamic, this self-feeding dynamic that's part of our humanity. And it either is going to be feeding in negativity or it's going to be feeding in its opposite. It's going to be feeding in the joy of creating our own lives on purpose. So that's what I referred to when I said rock and roll. It's like I get to rock and roll with my own life, or somebody else is running my life. And it's usually a 2 or 3 year old kid who is still living in fear of that horrible pain of abandonment and separation from my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the issues I brought up with you before we started was the work of Gabor Mate, M-A-T-E, for those of you who have never heard of Dr. Mate, who is a gentleman who's done a lot of research into the power and structure and dynamics of trauma. And so he's taught me a lot, and I presume from our conversations he's taught you a lot as well.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. He says it's not why the addiction, it's why the pain. Oh, what I was had of my tip of my tongue there. His belief is that any discord in somebody's life, emotionally, physically, mentally, is the direct result of complicated post-traumatic syndrome. And the way out is to relieve the trauma. So
right. So let's talk a little bit about how accountability practice does that.
Okay. My experience of telling the truth about myself when I was there, an example of that, my first experience was, hi, my name's John, I'm an alcoholic. Something happened internally with that statement that offered me the motivation to go back to another meeting, which was different than I normally would have done, because I'd been to meetings before and I thought they were, oh, they're cool. These people need it. And as soon as I heard myself in that statement of accountability, just accounting for where I found myself, something shifted inside me and I made a different decision. A different decision came out of that inner me, that place or connection to self, higher power, something. And from that moment till now, I've developed a way to offer it to as many people as possible. And course, I got a lot more information I had that first day. And so accountability happens to be what I'm talking about, a way out. And there's a way to do it, not no blame, no judgment, just stating the truth about where I find myself. And what I've discovered is that where I find myself, I made the choices to get there somehow, some way. And a lot of the choices were coming from that complicated post-traumatic stress that was looking for safety in what I had known already, in my experiences that I've survived. And I've survived a lot of chaos, a lot of abuse, a lot of pain. So I kept finding myself in those chaotic crises time after time after time, and had to explain in a rational way to somebody why I was here. And the only conclusion I came to several conclusions. There's something wrong with me, or there's something wrong with everybody else. The system, the spouse, the kids, the government, whoever happened to be in my field of vision at the time. And the accountability process freed me to be authentic, to be spontaneous, to be candid. I've developed the ability to say no. And it's a work in progress, and I'm now excited about life instead of dreading getting up in the morning.
I think we also, in addition to those experiences that you just said, we also find ourselves willing to be vulnerable to other people's love and connection.
Yeah.
Which was the exact opposite of what I was experiencing before, which was love is dangerous, love is not safe. And even though I want that experience of being loved and valued more than anything on the planet, I had to keep it away from me. And I had to develop substitutes for an actual love experience so that I could hobble my way through life.
Yeah.
Somehow placating that need for love with substitutes, faux love, so that I could at least have something to live on.
Yeah.
But now, having gone through this accountability practice, having noticed the way I got oriented to defending against love without conscious choice, and that I'd been replicating that year after year in my life since I was a little kid, now I can choose to be open to the expressions of love from you or anybody in my life. And I can notice, even though I still find myself willing to be open, I also notice those defense mechanisms still show up. But the difference now is, as you were saying earlier, I can choose how to be with those responses, and I can choose something else. And over time, as we do this work, I train my mind and my emotional body to, I like the way you say this, to lean forward rather than pull back.
Right.
In times of really sweetness in relationship, potential sweetness and joy.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the old days, my automatic unconscious impulse was to pull back.
Right. To leave the relationship, to get away, to go someplace.
Or to at least control it in such a way that it didn't threaten my sense of security, emotional security.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So for me, that's one of the major shifts that doing all this work has brought to me. As well as we were saying earlier, I get to choose my life. Or as you said, I look forward to getting up and finding out what's going to show up today,
Mhm.
as opposed to dreading getting up or cursing it or all those kinds of old behaviors.
Yeah.
Which again, for the newcomer, the person listening to this for the first time, those are perfectly normal reactions that a young little kid, particularly in the pre-verbal years of our lives, 0 to 4, would develop in order to deal with whatever threats or dangers or traumas may show up in his or her family.
Yeah.
And life goes to what you were saying about the complex PTSD. It's like life just has threats in it. It's just the way it is. No one gets born into paradise.
Right.
Everyone gets born into conditionalities, and parents who have their own unresolved issues and needs for love, and a culture that is still needy and lashes out in violent ways because we don't know yet how to just ask for and offer love to each other as
Yeah.
an instinctive response to stress.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So what is it? Can we take a minute or two and just sort of walk through the accountability process itself to help unpack a little bit of the actual steps that we take in order to create this new sense of self that you're talking about?
And yeah, can you bring up the diagram? If you can't, I can do it. The
Yeah,
accountability tree
just take me a
diagram.
minute to find it. So go ahead.
Um, it starts with, I'm going to define what I mean and what intentional living means by accountability.
Good
Um,
place to start.
accountability, if you look it up in the dictionary, one of the words to describe it is blameworthy. Somebody who takes responsibility for whatever happened, which means punishment. I remember saying this in at the Sacramento County Jail. We're going to talk about accountability, and although there were several responses. One was, I'm already sitting in my accountability, and I don't want to be accountable anymore, because every time I'm accountable, I get punished or trouble. Or so accountability in the form of intentional living is simply saying the truth where I find myself, expressing where I find myself in whatever character defect or what I used to call bad feeling, and simply state it out loud without blame or judgment. And blame and judgment keep us out of our emotional bodies, and it puts us into our rational part of our mind. So it says on that diagram right in the middle, first word in the heart, in red, truth. Now, my accountability, the example I used just now about, hi, my name's John, I'm an alcoholic, was me just stating where I found myself. The I'm an alcoholic was the avoidant behavior or the choice I made to escape the original pain or the confusion of the complicated post-traumatic stress.
You mean
My body,
just to clarify, so you mean being an alcoholic was
yes,
that response?
yes.
Got it.
Okay. Now, alcoholism is a pattern of behavior. When I say the truth, without blame or judgment, I'm an alcoholic, it validates the original pain. And this still to this day boggles my mind. Everything I was taught up until I discovered this was be positive, do good, try harder. And everything was about, I am my behaviors. And which is blame and judgment. There's no, that this truth separates me, the original essence of me, from my behavior of alcoholism. I could put in that truth. I'm mean. Okay, meanness is a behavior, is a choice made from an internal state where I find myself. The behavior is not me. So this is, I don't know, you can help me with a word here. It's confusing. It's diametrically opposed to everything I've been taught to do correctly in the past. It's a
counterintuitive.
Counterintuitive, that's the word I'm looking for. But when I say I'm an alcoholic, the post-traumatic stress that created it, which is in my subconscious, it's like it validates that. And there's a relief that happens in my body. It's the validation of where I find myself. And when I say that, and it validates the information in my subconscious, an emotion happens. It's like our bodies have not forgotten how to be emotional. We can deny it, we can demean it, we can diminish it, we can say we don't have them, and we're always in an emotional state. So it's an alignment of mind, heart, mind, body, spirit. So that truth creates a frequency of memory, of pain, of everything that came out of that in my choices. And there's a lucid moment that happens internally with me. And then something will come to me about what I want that's different than what I just said. In my case, what came out, and this is before I discovered the word intent, is I'm coming back, which was different than any other time I'd been. I've been to 3 meetings before. That time, I just knew I was coming back. And that started this journey of discovery and self-awareness. So accountability is the ability to simply state the truth of where I find myself. In the beginning, for me, they were all what we call character defects, or behaviors that were cause separation and or destruction. And believe me, separation is, in my mind now, destruction. It's so they're synonymous for me. So that's self-validating. We're down in truth, emotion, intent. This process is self-validating, which is what I'm looking for from the alcohol, from the behavior of being mean. And I'm trying to relieve pain, stress, frustration, and alcohol worked for me. Only it was cumulative and would lead to my downfall, destruction. And this mechanism inside me, this subconscious, complicated post-traumatic stress, was looking out for my best interest, trying to be okay. And the only way I knew how to do that was either by drinking and then becoming mean. So if you got anything to add at this point or question.
Well, what I was thinking about is that the acuity of this dilemma that these experiences put a little kid into. So last week we talked about the power of desire in dictating how our lives are. What do I want? And we say in this practice that we're always getting what we want, either on a conscious or a subconscious level.
Mm-hmm.
So I think about each of us is born, the moment we're born, we are desiring to be loved and taken care of.
Yes.
That's our natural state. And there isn't a single cloud on the horizon of our lives yet that says anything's wrong. It's just, we're born with this desire. And then we encounter pain, various kinds of pain. Some of us are born with physical um, problems that cause physical pain from the very beginning, and many of us are also going to be subject to emotional pain. We're hungry, we want to be fed, and we're allowed to lie in our cribs crying and hungry because we're not taken care of right away, or we've crapped in our diapers and we're uncomfortable or whatever. So it's just inevitable that that desire of that we're born with, just to be loved, taken care of, cherished, feeling one with, is going to ultimately be covered up by a desire to survive this trauma or this negativity, this pain.
Mm-hmm.
So the original desire gets warped by a new desire. So unfortunately, we move from a desire to be loved to a desire to be safe. And these get confused. And safety becomes our primary focus. Again, that's all without words. This is all happening before we have any words for this. These are just these emotional dynamics that you were talking about. And for me, as I go through this process and I state the truth about my behavior, then this desire for safety almost like comes off, so that the desire for love finally gets recognized.
Wow.
It's finally allowed to express, like the cap is taken off.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's an emotional resonance. Um, I have the same experience for you. The one that came to my mind as you were sharing I'm an alcoholic, is the time when I was around 31, 32, and I'd moved to California, and I'd long been estranged from my father. I didn't like him. He pissed me off. He scared me. And he used to call me up when I'd moved here from Michigan, and we would chat, and I would always be on my guard. And he would always end these conversations with saying, son, I love you. And I would just sit there and go, bullshit, you don't love me. And rah, rah, rah. So one day I finally just worked up the courage to say, Dad, I don't believe you. And my father said, I'm so glad you told me that. And in that moment, I felt everything melt.
Mm-hmm.
The resistance, because the truth was, I thought my dad didn't love me, and I didn't ever say that out loud.
Right.
So I told him the truth, and what came back to me from him was, I'm glad you told me that. AKA, this is how I love you. I let you be. I let you tell whatever truth you need to tell me.
Yes. No blame, no judgment.
Exactly. No blame, no judgment. So that original desire to be loved got that defensive cap taken off.
Yes.
So that I could just open up and feel. Now, I didn't have, this was before I met you and did the accountabilities many years before that.
Yeah.
But I still can remember to this day that emotional resonance of the truth. The truth got expressed, and it not only got expressed by me, it got expressed in relationship with my father.
Yeah.
So that the power of the emotional vibration was magnified by its being witnessed and received by another person.
Yes.
Because as we've said in this podcast many times, we were wounded in a social relationship and we get healed in a social relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. We were, the way I put it, my wounding came in the presence of people. Necessarily, my healing comes in the presence of people.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And
then,
you were, I want to say, fortunate to have the dad you had who was able to hear that without being defensive or blaming or criticizing or explaining to you why you should.
that's why I was so shocked, because I was ready for all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I was very fortunate, but I think, again, as I reflect on your determination to come back, or that experience I had with my father, there is a grace that's available to us.
Yes.
No matter how much we suffer, no matter how much despair we may find ourselves in, there's something in all human beings, and I think that's the original desire that we're born with, that innocent, infinite desire to be loved and to love.
Mm-hmm.
Has a grace resonance that, I mean, I think you probably can snuff it out, but it's very hard to snuff it out and keep it snuffed out.
Right. Yeah. My belief is that it's all, I was going to use the word resilient. It's never been harmed. It's been covered up by my perception and then need to move to some kind of comfort or safety. And mine was through a substance, alcohol. And that's why me telling the truth, when I feel that, the impetus to say I'm coming back, or mean, if I say I'm mean, to what came out of me, it is my intent to be kind. That's coming from that essence that can't be destroyed. It can be covered up and blocked and stuffed, and yeah, it's always in there. And I think that's the grace of whoever, whatever, however, that it's still there. And my willingness to own my behaviors opens it up for me. And I've seen it happen with so many men in the prisons when they get to a place where they become willing to even attempt this. There, you can see it happening in their body. They soften, their whole face muscles shift, and there's this softness and this openness that happens in the middle of a prison or a county jail. It's just amazing process. So
it demonstrates that this process is available to anybody and everybody who would like to learn to work it.
Exactly.
Because it does focus on some very universal principles of our humanness.
Yes. Yeah. So
one of the things that we talked about also before we started the podcast from Gabor Mate, I want to throw this quote up here because it's part of I think the challenge that we have in understanding. And of course, understanding can be problematic, because there's mental understanding and then there's soul understanding, and those two things are not always the same. But I wanted to point this one out here that says, love felt by the parent does not automatically translate into love experienced by the child.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that I noticed in when I started in adult children of alcoholics 12-step programs, even more so than when we were doing the accountability work, is this confusion that we get around how to be with our parents who were the perpetrators of the trauma that we experienced, but they weren't perpetrators in the sense of that being a conscious choice. maybe in a teeny tiny fraction of parents, they consciously intend to harm their children, but most parents do not tend to harm their children. And most parents, in fact, think they're loving their children.
Yes.
And so I love what Mate says, the love felt by the parent does not necessarily translate into a love experienced by the child.
Right. An example of that would be hearing somebody say, this is going to hurt me more than it hurt you. I'm doing this because I love you. It's
Right.
like, well, okay, then don't love me, please.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Well, not only that, but what I notice is it's impossible for a child to, at least during childhood, to blame the parents for what's going wrong.
Yes.
And so we just blame ourselves. There's
Yeah.
something wrong with me. And of course, there's also parental words that can reinforce that, like, what do you think you're doing? Who do you think you are? After everything I've done for you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
That are going to just reinforce that sense that the kid has that there's something defective with him or her.
Yeah.
And again, this is not, what's difficult for us is to learn to forgive these people for doing this. Because once we become aware of how this happened to us, it's kind of hard. People get angry.
Yes.
And justifiably so. There's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
So learning to discern the impact of the actions or the behaviors from the intentions has some power to it, is what I think Mate's trying to point out here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I can blame the behavior without blaming the person.
Well, I'd like to say own the behavior. And I get you were talking about parents' behavior, so I would like to say blame nothing. Is any discord from whoever comes from unresolved pain. So my parents did the best they could with the information they had. And when I first said that, I said it because it seemed like the right thing to do. Now I say it, and there's this knowingness that that's absolute truth. And I've worked through the anger, resentment, bitterness, sadness, bargaining around it, which is the grief process. And then the grief process ends up in this place of acceptance. Somebody once said, there was actually a poster in the jail, forgiveness means letting go of any possibility of changing the past. And that acceptance of it also gave me choice, gave me freedom, gave me a sense of self, a sense of autonomy, I'm going to say belonging. It was when I first started this work, my intent was to work with the homeless. And one of the things I discovered is that the people in jail are technically homeless. And then I was thinking the other day, that could describe 99% of the people on the planet is for this need to belong. They don't have a place to belong. And that I now see as home. So, you know, this keeps getting bigger and bigger for me. Homeless were the guys on the street, then they're the guys in the jail. Now it's people I talk to struggling to belong, to feel like they belong, that they're needed and they contribute.
Well, one of the Go ahead.
I said to a client who has been with me for, 2 or 3 months, and at this group we were in, he went, "Oh my God!" And then he said his perception of what I was telling him, and he got it. It was like, oh, it's me not letting go of what I'm holding on myself that's keeping me from being authentic. And I said, that's wow. And I sat with him after the group and reinforced it. And when we got done talking, I go, I'd like to say something to you. He said, sure. And I just looked at him and I said, welcome home. Welcome home. This is what we've been looking for a long time. Is a way out, something solid that we can like put our feet on and grab and say that I can do this.
Yeah, and at the same time that it's a way out, it's a way back.
Yes.
That's the welcome home.
Yeah. So there were a couple other Gabor Mate quotes up there that were in alignment with the intentional living accountability process.
Well, there's a lot that Mate says that's in alignment.
Yeah. So
I like this one. Not all addictions are rooted in abuse or trauma, but I do believe that all can be traced to painful experience. A hurt is at the center of all addictive behaviors. It is present in the gambler, the internet addict, the compulsive shopper, and the workaholic. The wound may not be as deep and the ache not as excruciating, and it may even be entirely hidden, but it's there. And as we'll see, the effects of early stress or adverse experiences directly shape both the psychology and the neurobiology of addiction in the brain.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that we don't stress enough, which is that these internal senses of stress, trauma, pain, emotional pain are actually physiologically wired in the brain.
Yes.
And part of the reason that the work to shift all of this takes time and sometimes seems very difficult is because there's a physiological concentration that has to also be changed. It also has to be transformed to support a new habit of thought, a new habit of emotional being.
Mm-hmm. In fact, every emotion or feeling that you can delineate, describe, has a chemical makeup.
Right.
Serotonin is the feel-good neurotransmitter. And when somebody's depressed, that's the part or the chemistry that they affect through pharmaceuticals. I think they call it reuptake inhibitors, so that more of the serotonin stays on the outside than it does going back to where it was. And that's my layman's term for uptake inhibitors, reuptake inhibitors. So we create these chemicals in our body. In family of origin dysfunction or childhood trauma, the body gets used to creating this chemistry, which we survived. Our body wants us to survive, and I'm speaking our body, namely the reticular activating system, survival mechanism, being fed information from the subconscious pool of information where our trauma sits, creating a place where we can survive, and that is equated to the stressors, cortisoids, adrenaline. So we actually do the things we need to do so that the body feels safe and creates stressors through our drama, crisis, catastrophizing, instead of just accepting, wow, I'm here right now, and right now I'm acting in a mean, destructive, dismissive way. And that truth okay, the chemistry shifts. The body starts producing different chemistry. And your comment about this takes time is learning, teaching the body how to create the chemistry that you want, or repeating something that brought relief enough times to where the body responds in on the material level, the pharmacological level. The body, the brain, the endocrine system is the most powerful and prolific pharmaceutical production place on the planet. It will give you whatever you need to survive whatever situation and or enjoy whatever situation you find yourself.
And it's a gift that we are alive at a time where so much discovery is going on as to the mechanism of this body-mind connection.
Mm-hmm.
The mechanism of how our thoughts generate emotions, and then emotions in turn generate new thoughts, and again can create a downward cycle, or it can create a virtuous cycle, an upward cycle. And part of what I appreciate about the accountability practice is that it allows me to experience that without having to know anything about that mechanism.
Yes.
But knowing about the mechanism allows me to appreciate that these things take time, and that there is actual scientific validation for how this process can actually work, and that it will work.
Right.
Because it's that iterative process that you were just talking to that for me has resulted in a permanent shift in the way I react to things. It's quite remarkable. And when we started this work together, if you had said, I don't think you did, or maybe you did and I just didn't hear it, entirely possible, that one day I would not be plagued by the same internal demons that were plaguing me when we were first working together. I probably couldn't have heard that, actually, now that I consider it.
Yeah.
It probably would have made no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't say that. But what I did say is you will come to a life you never knew possible.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my friends, I'm here to tell you, John was right.
Yeah, that's only because I've come to a life that I never knew was possible by practicing what I teach.
Right.
So he's got a lot of good stuff in here.
Yeah. There's the one that you said earlier, not why the addiction, but why the pain.
Yeah.
And again, I think that accountability practice is the focuses on the pain, that is to say, on the experience rather than the thought about the experience.
Right.
So that, go ahead.
When I name the end result of this process of complicated post-traumatic stress, family of origin trauma, internal pain of not belonging, when I go to the end result of that process and simply state the truth here, no blame, no judgment. And for me, my first awareness was based on my entire life, the end result for me was alcoholic. So when I owned alcoholic, there was an alignment made that validated my whole life. It's like, and it's not rational, it's not linear, it's not logical, and there was a shift, there was a release, there was a letting go that my body knows how to do. Simply say the truth. The other statement you had was enlightened witness. Another author, Alice Miller, talked about if a child is in a traumatic place and they have at least one or several enlightened witnesses simply who people who witness their pain without judging, blaming, or punishing. Actually, and I want to say witness their behavior without punishing, blame, or judgment. That is like an experience that the body has for the rest of your life. There are some people who have had no enlightened witness whatsoever, and they've become infamous in our history. And one of them that she cited was Hitler, because she was German, born right around early 40s, I think, or late 30s. And she studied his life, and he had nobody to give him any relief or see him whatsoever. And it came out in his politics.
There's a couple of quotes here. There's the shame is the deepest of the negative, quote, negative emotions, end quote, a feeling we will do almost anything to avoid. Unfortunately, our abiding fear of shame impairs our ability to see reality. And then skipping one down, the one at the bottom, the attempt to escape from pain is what creates more pain.
Yes. Yeah. My alcoholism created more pain. And then when somebody says, "Hey, take a look at your pain," I say, "Hell no, this is too much there. I'm no, I don't want to do that." And that's where the relief, the healing, the validation. So
one of the things that one of the principles that you have in another part of the work is what you call the 4 constants, and one of those is move toward your pain.
mm-hmm.
And we've been having some robust conversations about that up here, because the pain that we're talking about moving toward is that original pain that we don't want to move toward at all.
Right.
And what I've discovered is that in order to survive that original pain, I created substitute pains.
Yes.
And so because I couldn't have moved toward the original pain because I never wanted to feel it again, I could move toward the substitute pains and explore what they may have to teach me about what they were covering up.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me many, many years of grappling with that, because it's just like it's like you don't want to put your hand on the stove twice.
Right.
And so every time you move toward it, there's just a part of you that says no, not going there. So this move toward your pain becomes a challenge to learn to do in a way that is safe enough and yet risky enough to learn what the pain has to teach us.
Mm-hmm. I have an example. I was at my daughter's house, and she had just come home, and she was holding my grandson, and they were playing, and she was holding him, and then she like pretended she dropped him, and that's a game they play. Only before he was like aware of the game. This time he was not aware of the game. So she did that, and we laughed, and I saw a look on his face, and then he got down, and he started, in the descriptive word from my place of a child being obstinate. He threw a toy. She was closing the dishwasher drawer, and he just came over and put his hand on it so she couldn't do it, and just stood there like, no. And everything was no. And we continued our evening, and I went home and I thought, oh my God, that scared him that he was terrified. And so I called her back up and I said, do you think that when you were playing with him and you dropped him, that scared him? And the behavior that after that was what came out, standing or putting his hand on the dishwasher drawer and all the other things he did, because he just shifted. And she goes, yeah. And so I was on the phone with her, and she goes, Solomon, when I dropped you, did that scare you? He goes, yes. And then it was like he could put it together. So without having that enlightened witness, I did not have that enlightened witness. So whatever happened to me, I got this obstinate thing, screw you, you're not going to do it if I don't want you to, control thing going on with no relief. No, and I didn't understand why I was doing it. I would actually be doing some critical, shaming, demeaning thing to somebody, and in my mind I would say, stop, don't do, whoa, why are you doing this? And it didn't make any difference how loud this voice was.
Right.
I couldn't stop the behavior. And when I saw that, and then offered the information to my daughter and saw his agreement, see, that's what we mean by enlightened witness. He gets to process that fear. And I think another one in there was that he felt laughed at because we were both laughing, and he stopped engaging. So that's another, I mean, it just get complicated post-traumatic stress. So that one event could have put all kinds of perceptions in his mind, and the way out was to say no, to throw something, to lean on a door that somebody was trying to do, be intrusive. And what he was doing was trying to get closer to, because his mother lifted the drawer up, and he just went over and just put his hand on it and said, no, you're not lifting it. It was incredible moment. So, and my family, it's like being the children of the preacher. You're always on blast on a Sunday, and it's like, and they understand. I believe, and they're grateful.
The group process that we use in the accountability practice is a provision of enlightened witnesses.
Yes.
For those who either A, had them, and so we resonate with that, or for those who B, never had them, they can at least now have the first experience of being in a group of people who simply are not going to ever do anything but accept the statements that we are saying out loud.
Yes.
No matter what they are, no matter how crazy we may judge them, no matter how frightening or scary it might be for us to admit certain things out loud, this collective emotional energetic field that we create for each other is that validation experience that we've been looking for since we lost it.
Yes.
Again, this is another way of experiencing coming home.
Yes. And I believe that's true in every 12-step, and I've been to several AA, NA relationships. That's what happens there. You simply get to express, and people listen, and nobody comments on what they heard you say. Yeah, it's one of the things I think that makes the 12-step work as well as it does.
So what's your saying about that again, about being wounded in the presence of others? Is that how it's,
yeah,
say it?
my wounding came in the presence of people. Necessarily my healing
Right
comes in the presence of people.
And that's what the group is.
Yes.
It's a group of people with whom I can practice letting go and creating something new.
Yes, and share something in common.
Plus, of course, sharing something in common.
Yeah. Because when I first went there, I thought that I was the only one. And I went into a group of like 25 people, and they're all saying the same thing. And it's like, oh my God, they read the problem. And I go, oh my God, how'd they know I was coming? I actually thought I was the only one on the planet that felt the way I felt.
Well, I gotta share with you that when I first started going to adult children of alcoholics meetings, I didn't say anything for 11 months because I thought
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
For 11 months, I sat there judging everything that someone would say. Particularly, there were people who would get up and say the same thing over and over and over again, and I'm like, God, don't you get a clue what's wrong with you? You know, just
Yeah,
the,
on and
the
on and on.
endless critical chatter. And then something happened at the end of the 11th month. Somehow, everybody became beautiful,
Yeah,
and something shifted again. And I assert it was just sitting in a group of people who were accepting
yes,
for 11 months.
yeah.
Because
They
I
have
just
a
never had that experience before.
right. They have a saying: "Wait for the miracle."
Yeah.
Yeah, wait for the miracle.
And again, as we talked earlier, I was graced with that little voice that said, wait.
Hmm.
Even as the critical voice was criticizing away, there was another voice saying, you don't need to say any of this out loud. Just keep it to yourself and wait.
Hmm. Yeah,
As always, with no clue that that experience would ever occur. And
right.
then it did.
It did. It's like a grace moment.
Another one. So as we come to an end of our time together today, is there anything you'd like to leave us with?
Um, um, if whoever's listening to this is confused or maybe curious, um, your ability to grasp this something new um, is I want to say the struggle. The fact that you don't understand it is a validation that there's probably something in it for you. If Marty and I talk about things you get and say, oh yeah, okay, cool, yeah, me too. As far as the process of the way out, it's not new, and we need to keep quiet because we're part of the problem. Our ability to talk the way we do, and then you find yourself incrementally grasping, feeling, and it's mostly feeling something different. Breathe and stay with that, and check out our next podcast. See what we say then.
Or if you'd like to participate in one of our group meetings, John is facilitating a group meeting on Saturday mornings at 8:30 Pacific time. And we have several Rusty Nail meetings, accountability meetings that are on Zoom also in Sacramento. Monday evenings, Thursday evenings for everybody. And there's a Tuesday night meeting for men only. And the ways to contact us and get connected with those meetings will be on the closing credits to our podcast today. So please feel free to reach out, and we'll be happy to share with you the addresses, the Zoom addresses to get into the meeting. So feel free to check it out. So I thank you, John, for your time today, and I look forward to the next one.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.